She always loved music. Ever since she was little, she would hum tunes while doing chores or tap rhythms on any surface she could find. There was something magical about how the notes came together, and even though her family didn't have much, she found a way to create music in every corner of her life. Her parents worked long hours and often didn't notice the small melodies she made, but she didn't mind. Music was her world. At school, things were different. She wanted to share her love for music, but the school didn't take it seriously. The teachers cared about grades and exams more than anything else. One day, she asked a teacher if she could play a song during music class. The teacher looked at her with a raised eyebrow and a small, dismissive smile. "You? Play? Let's see what you've got," the teacher said, clearly expecting failure. She felt a little nervous, but she tried anyway. As she pressed the keys, her hands trembled and she hit wrong notes. Some students giggled, and the teacher chuckled quietly. That small laugh felt heavier than the wrong notes themselves. From that moment, she realized that sharing her passion wasn't going to be easy, but she didn't give up. Every evening, after her homework was done and the house was quiet, she would sit by the old piano in the corner of their living room. The piano had scratches and chipped keys, but she didn't care. She pressed each key carefully, letting the sounds fill the room. Sometimes she played simple songs she had learned from a small notebook of sheet music. Other times, she closed her eyes and let her fingers wander, creating melodies no one had ever heard before. It was during these moments that she felt truly alive. Her friends at school didn't understand her. They talked about games, TV shows, and sports. She tried to join in, but her mind kept drifting to rhythms and melodies. Sometimes she would hum softly under her breath, and one or two friends noticed. "You're weird," one of them said once, not in a mean way but in the way kids say things when they don't understand. She laughed it off and continued playing, deciding that it was better to be a little different than to lose herself in what others thought was normal. Even though her music wasn't appreciated at school, there were small victories at home. Her younger sibling, though only a little kid, would sit by the piano and clap along whenever she played. Their eyes would shine with wonder, and that small encouragement meant more than anything the teachers could say. She began to practice with more focus, imagining herself performing for a crowd that understood her. It was a dream she kept in her heart, even if it felt far away. Some days were harder than others. Teachers would make offhand comments like, "Maybe stick to something simple," or, "Music isn't important, focus on your tests." Those words stung, but they also fueled her determination. She started to sneak extra practice time whenever she could, before school, during breaks, and late at night when everyone was asleep. Each note she played was a quiet rebellion against the doubts and laughter she faced at school. She knew she had something special even if no one else did yet. She also discovered that music could be a comfort. On days when the teachers laughed or the other students made fun of her attempts, she would go home and play the piano, letting every mistake wash away. She would close her eyes and imagine herself in a grand concert hall, the audience holding their breath as she played a piece perfectly. In those moments, she forgot about the teasing and felt proud of her own abilities. Her parents noticed her growing skill, though they couldn't fully understand it. They would ask, "What are you playing?" And she would explain in simple words, showing the notes and the melodies. Sometimes, her father would sit quietly, listening without interrupting. Those moments felt like validation. It was not applause from a large crowd, but it was real, and it was enough to keep her going. She began to experiment with different styles. Classical pieces challenged her technically, while modern tunes allowed her creativity to flow freely. She started blending the two, creating something unique. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't matter if it sounded strange to others. She was learning to express herself fully through the piano, and that joy was hers alone. School continued to be difficult. Music class was still a place of skepticism. A teacher once announced a music test and handed out sheet music. When she tried to interpret it in her own way, the teacher frowned. "Follow the notes exactly," the teacher said. She did follow them, but she added subtle changes that made the piece sound richer. The teacher didn't notice, but a few classmates leaned in and whispered, Wow, that sounds different. Even small recognition from peers felt like a secret reward, a tiny spark in a room full of doubt. Her determination didn't go unnoticed outside her immediate family either. A neighbor, an elderly woman who had once played in a small orchestra, heard her practicing one afternoon. She knocked on the door and said, "You have a gift. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. She had heard encouragement before, but this was different. Someone who understood music recognized her talent. That night, she played longer than usual, letting every note echo with newfound confidence. Despite these moments of support, the journey wasn't easy. She faced frustration when she couldn't get a passage right or when her fingers didn't move the way she wanted. She sometimes cried quietly in front of the piano, feeling that the world might never see what she could do. Yet each tear seemed to strengthen her resolve. Music was not just something she did. It was a part of who she was, and she decided she would not stop no matter what anyone said. Her love for music started to change her perspective on everything. School subjects that once seemed boring now had rhythm and patterns in her mind. Math problems became puzzles, and even writing assignments felt like composing short verses. She realized that her passion for music wasn't separate from the rest of her life. It influenced everything she did, making ordinary things feel creative and alive. There were moments of daydreaming too. She imagined herself on stage, the lights dimmed, the audience hushed, waiting for her to begin. Her fingers would fly over the keys, and the room would fill with sound. She imagined teachers who once laughed now watching with awe, classmates whispering, "She's amazing," and parents proud beyond words. These daydreams kept her practicing, each one a step closer to reality. Sometimes, she shared her music quietly with a few friends who were willing to listen. They might not have understood everything, but they appreciated the beauty in it. And slowly, she learned that she didn't need everyone to believe in her. She only needed to believe in herself and find the small pockets of support where they existed. By the end of that school year, she had changed in ways no one noticed at first. She walked taller, spoke with a little more confidence, and her eyes held a spark that hadn't been there before. The laughter of teachers no longer weighed her down as much. She had discovered something important. Her music was her strength, her sanctuary, and her voice in a world that often ignored it. Even though her talent was still hidden from most people, she carried it proudly. Each practice session, each mistake corrected, each melody discovered was a step on a path only she could walk. And deep down, she knew that one day, the world would hear her. One day, the laughter would turn into applause, and the teachers who once doubted her would see what she always knew. Her music was extraordinary. Until that day came, she would continue to play, to create, and to dream. And in that quiet dedication, she found joy, strength, and the first taste of the triumph that awaited her. She had always played the piano quietly, in the corners of her home, where the world couldn't see. But one evening, as she sat by the old piano, her younger sibling came running in with wide eyes. "Play that song again," they shouted. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled and began to play. This time, she let herself go, letting the notes flow freely without worrying about mistakes or anyone watching. The music filled the room with warmth and life. Her sibling clapped along, trying to copy the rhythms with little hands, and the sound made her laugh. That simple joy gave her confidence. She realized that the music she had kept hidden could bring happiness to others too, even in small ways. It was the first time she understood that her talent could have a real impact on people. A few days later, her neighbor, the elderly woman who had once played in an orchestra, noticed her practicing again. She knocked on the door and said, "You need to show this to someone who can guide you. You have a gift that shouldn't stay hidden." First, she was nervous. She wasn't ready to play in front of strangers. But the woman offered to teach her a few lessons, just small guidance on technique and expression. This was the first time someone outside her family recognized her talent in a serious way. The lessons were different from anything she had experienced. The woman showed her how to focus on the emotion behind each note, how to listen to the spaces between the sounds, and how to make the piano sing. For the first time, playing the piano felt like more than just pressing keys. It became a conversation, a way to express thoughts and feelings that words could never capture. She practiced harder than ever, eager to absorb every bit of wisdom the woman shared. As the weeks went by, she began to notice changes in her own playing. She could perform more complicated pieces without fear, and her improvisation became smoother. The melodies she created on her own started to have depth and richness she hadn't imagined before. Sometimes, she would play late into the night, her fingers dancing over the keys while the moonlight spilled into the room. Each note felt like a step closer to something bigger, though she didn't know exactly what that was yet. One afternoon, the woman suggested that she perform at a small community gathering. It wasn't a big audience, just a few neighbors and friends, but it was still a performance outside her safe space. She felt a knot in her stomach at the idea. What if she made a mistake? What if people laughed? She thought of the teachers at school and the laughter she had endured before. But then she remembered her siblings clapping, the warmth of the notes filling her home, and the encouragement of the neighbor. Maybe this time could be different. The day of the performance arrived. She wore a simple dress and carried herself with nervous excitement. The small audience sat in folding chairs, waiting quietly. She took a deep breath, sat at the piano, and began. At first, her hands trembled slightly, but as the music flowed, her confidence grew. She closed her eyes and let herself feel every note. The room seemed to vanish, leaving only her and the piano. When the last note faded, there was a moment of silence. Then slowly the audience began to clap. The sound was soft at first, then stronger, warmer, filling her with an emotion she hadn't felt before. Some people came up to her afterward, smiling and praising her skill. The neighbor beamed with pride, and her sibling hugged her tightly, whispering, "You were amazing." For the first time, she realized that sharing her music could create moments of happiness and connection. The laughter and doubt she had experienced before no longer seemed so important. After that day, she started to think about music in a new way. She began to see herself not just as someone who played the piano in secret, but as someone who could truly share her gift with the world. She practiced with more purpose, learning new pieces and experimenting with her own compositions. Every evening, the piano became her sanctuary, a place to grow and explore. School still had its challenges. Music class remained a place of skepticism. Some teachers barely noticed her improvement, and a few students still made teasing remarks. But she had changed inside. She no longer sought approval from those who doubted her. She focused on her own growth, letting the music guide her. And slowly, even a few classmates began to notice. They would stop and listen quietly when she played during breaks, nodding in admiration. Their whispers were not loud, but they were enough to remind her that progress was real. Her neighbor continued to guide her, introducing her to more advanced techniques and helping her understand musical expression on a deeper level. She learned about the history of the piano, famous composers, and the stories behind their compositions. Each lesson opened a new door, and her understanding of music deepened. She discovered that the piano was not just an instrument, but a bridge to emotions, memories, and stories that words could never fully capture. One day, her neighbor suggested that she try composing her own piece. At first, the idea seemed daunting. How could she create something entirely new? But as she sat at the piano, ideas began to flow. She started with a simple melody, then added harmonies and variations. The piece grew organically, reflecting her feelings and experiences. When she played it aloud, she felt a thrill unlike any before. It was her music, completely her own, and it had a voice that no one could take away. Encouraged by her progress, she began to dream bigger. Maybe she could perform at a larger event or even participate in a competition. The thought made her nervous, but it also excited her. She began to imagine herself standing on a stage, the audience listening in awe, feeling the emotions she poured into every note. These dreams fueled her determination to practice harder and learn more. At home, she continued to inspire her sibling and sometimes her parents, who now took a little more interest in her music. They would ask about the pieces she was learning, and her father would occasionally hum along. It was small, but it felt significant. She realized that her music could bring people together, even in ways she hadn't anticipated. She also learned to be patient with herself. Not every day went smoothly. Some pieces were difficult, her fingers would stumble, or her mind would wander. But she understood that mistakes were part of the process. Each challenge was an opportunity to improve, and each small success was a step forward. The laughter from her past seemed to fade further with every practice session, replaced by a quiet confidence that she was on the right path. Her teacher at school eventually noticed subtle changes in her playing during music class. The teacher didn't praise her loudly, but there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. A few classmates began to ask her questions about the pieces she played or complimented the melodies she created. While it wasn't the recognition she had longed for, it was a start. She realized that change often comes slowly, and what mattered most was her own commitment to growth. The neighbor continued to encourage her to perform for more people. She suggested small community events, school functions, or even informal gatherings where music lovers would be present. The idea of performing in front of strangers was still intimidating, but she felt ready to face it. The more she shared her music, the more she discovered the joy it could bring, not just to herself but to others. By the end of this period, she had grown in ways that were visible and invisible. Her skills had improved dramatically, her confidence had grown, and her understanding of music had deepened. She still practiced every day, sometimes for hours, sometimes in short bursts, but each moment was meaningful. She had learned that music was not just about impressing others but about expressing herself and connecting with the world in a way that felt honest and real. She often thought back to the days when teachers laughed or dismissed her, remembering the sting but also recognizing how far she had come. Those moments of doubt had shaped her determination and had driven her to practice, to explore, and to grow. Now, she could see a future where her music might inspire and move people, and that thought made every effort worthwhile. Even in quiet moments at home, as she played the piano alone, she felt a sense of pride and purpose. Her melodies were no longer just experiments. They were statements of her identity, expressions of her heart. Each note was a declaration that she would not be silenced, that her talent was real, and that she could make a difference, however small it might seem at first. And so, she continued to practice, to learn, and to dream. Each day brought new challenges and new opportunities, and she faced them with courage and determination. The hidden piano gift she had nurtured in secret was beginning to shine, and she was ready to share it with the world when the time came. The journey was only beginning, but she knew that her music would carry her forward, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. She could hardly believe it when she was asked to play at the school's annual cultural event. It wasn't a huge auditorium, but it felt enormous to her. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She thought about the teachers who had laughed at her, the classmates who had doubted her, and the friends who had quietly supported her. This was the moment when she would step out of the shadows and show everyone what she could do. She arrived early and sat by the piano, staring at the keys. Her hands were clammy, and her stomach churned with anticipation. She remembered all the evenings she had spent practicing alone, the mistakes she had made, and the melodies she had discovered in the quiet. Every note she played in the practice room had led her to this moment. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, imagining herself telling a story through music, one note at a time. When it was her turn, she walked to the stage slowly, her fingers brushing over the piano keys as if greeting old friends. The audience was silent, curious about the girl who rarely spoke but loved music so much. She sat down and began to play. The first few notes were soft, cautious, but as she continued, she felt the music flow naturally. She poured her emotions into every chord, every pause, every crescendo. The room seemed to hold its breath, listening to a story told without words. Her hands moved with confidence now, sliding across the keys as if the piano was an extension of herself. She played pieces she had learned from her mentor, blending them with melodies she had composed on her own. Each note carried a sense of honesty, a reflection of her journey from doubt to discovery. She felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration, but the music carried her forward, giving her courage. As she played, she noticed the expressions of the audience changing. Some teachers who had once doubted her were leaning forward, eyes wide with surprise. A few classmates whispered among themselves, clearly impressed. Even the principal, who rarely showed emotion at performances, seemed moved by the depth of her music. The laughter and ridicule from before felt like a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of admiration. By the time she reached the final notes, she was completely immersed in the music. She held the last chord, letting it linger, and then slowly lifted her hands. The room was silent for a heartbeat, and then applause erupted. It was louder, more genuine than anything she had ever heard. People were on their feet, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Her heart swelled with pride and disbelief. She had done it. She had shown her talent to the world, and it had been received with awe. After the performance, several teachers approached her. One, who had always been skeptical, said quietly, "I underestimated you. That was beautiful." A few classmates came over, asking how she learned to play so well. She smiled, feeling a mix of relief and joy. The recognition was new and exciting, but what mattered most was that she had proven to herself what she was capable of. She had faced her fears, and it had paid off. Her mentor, the elderly neighbor who had first guided her, was there as well. She hugged her tightly and said, "I always knew you had this in you. You just needed to believe it too." The words filled her with warmth. She realized that the journey wasn't just about the performance. It was about the growth, the perseverance, and the courage to keep going despite doubt and fear. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about the performance. She replayed every note in her mind, analyzing what went well and what could be improved. She knew there was still much to learn, but the experience had given her confidence and a sense of purpose. She began to see that music was not just a hobby or a secret passion. It was a path she wanted to follow, a way to connect with people and share her emotions. The days that followed brought new opportunities. Some classmates who had never paid attention now asked to hear her play during breaks. A local community group invited her to perform at a small concert in the town hall. Even a music teacher from another school contacted her mentor to learn more about her progress. Slowly but surely, her hidden talent was gaining recognition beyond her immediate circle. She continued to practice rigorously, refining her techniques and experimenting with new compositions. She started keeping a journal of her musical ideas, noting down melodies and harmonies that came to her in quiet moments. Each day of practice became more meaningful, as she could see the results of her dedication reflected in her growing skill and confidence. Her family, who had quietly supported her from the beginning, celebrated each new milestone with pride. Her sibling would often ask her to play the same song again, clapping along with enthusiasm. Her parents began to understand the depth of her passion and the effort she put into it. They would sometimes sit silently in the corner, listening to her music, appreciating the talent they had once only glimpsed. Even with the growing recognition, she remained humble. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Hard work, patience, and persistence were equally important. She reminded herself of the early days when her teachers laughed, when mistakes felt discouraging, and when no one seemed to care about her music. Those memories fueled her determination to continue improving and to inspire others who might be struggling to follow their own passions. One afternoon, she was approached by a local music teacher who had heard about her performance. The teacher offered to give her advanced lessons and even suggested participating in a regional competition. At first, she hesitated. The thought of performing on an even larger stage was intimidating. But she also felt excitement and a sense of readiness. She remembered the courage it had taken to perform at the school event and realized she was capable of taking the next step. With her mentor and family's encouragement, she agreed. She began to practice with renewed intensity, learning to control every nuance of her playing, mastering difficult pieces, and adding her own creative touches. Each practice session brought a mixture of challenge and satisfaction. She learned to manage her nerves, focus on expression rather than perfection, and find joy in the process as much as in the outcome. As the regional competition approached, she began to imagine the stage, the audience, and the possibility of performing beyond her town. She visualized herself playing with confidence, conveying emotion through every note. She also prepared for the inevitable challenges, unexpected mistakes, moments of self-doubt, and the pressure of being watched by many people. She knew that her strength lay not only in her talent but in her persistence and passion. The day of the regional event arrived, and she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness unlike anything she had experienced before. The venue was larger, the audience unfamiliar, and the stakes higher. Yet, as she sat at the piano, she remembered every evening of practice, every small performance, and every moment she had believed in herself despite doubt. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly, a blend of technical skill and emotional depth. Each piece told a story, and the audience listened in awe. She felt connected to every listener, aware of their presence but not intimidated. She had learned to transform nervous energy into focused expression. When the final note echoed through the hall, there was a moment of silence, followed by applause that seemed to shake the walls. The recognition she had longed for had arrived, but even more importantly, she had experienced the joy of sharing her music fully and fearlessly. By the end of the day, she had gained not only recognition but also a sense of accomplishment. She had stepped far beyond the shadows of doubt and ridicule and found a place where her music could be appreciated. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more performances, and more opportunities to grow, but she felt ready. She had discovered the power of her hidden talent and the joy of using it to connect with others, and that knowledge gave her confidence for everything to come. Even after her first big performance, her journey was far from over. She discovered that talent alone was not enough to carry her forward. Every day brought new challenges, both in mastering more difficult pieces and balancing her growing public presence with school responsibilities. She still had to wake up early for classes, complete assignments, and find time for practice. Some days it felt overwhelming, but she had learned to persevere. Her mentor continued to guide her, introducing advanced techniques and encouraging creativity. She spent hours working on finger strength, timing, and expression. Some exercises were tiring, and her fingers ached after long practice sessions. There were moments of frustration when she couldn't play a passage correctly or when she made mistakes during performance rehearsals. Yet, she reminded herself that every failure was a lesson, and each mistake was an opportunity to improve. The piano became a place of growth and resilience. At school, she noticed subtle changes in the way people treated her. Some teachers who had laughed before now watched her with respect, though they didn't always admit it. A few classmates who had doubted her became curious, asking how she learned such difficult pieces or complimenting her melodies. She felt a quiet pride, realizing that her perseverance had begun to earn recognition. However, there were still skeptics, and she sometimes overheard whispers doubting her ability or attributing her success to luck. She had learned not to let these comments affect her focus. Her family remained her greatest source of support. Her sibling was always eager to hear new pieces, clapping and smiling with enthusiasm. Her parents began to take a deeper interest, asking questions about the music and even attending her small performances. Their quiet encouragement provided a sense of stability and love that strengthened her resolve. She knew that no matter what happened outside, she had a home where her passion was understood and nurtured. She started participating in more formal events and competitions. These were intimidating at first, as the audiences were larger and the expectations higher. Yet, she found that each performance boosted her confidence. She learned to manage nerves, focus on expression, and connect with the audience through her music. The thrill of performing and the satisfaction of sharing her gift reinforced her commitment to improvement. She began to see that music was not just about technical skill. It was about touching people's hearts. Challenges arose in unexpected ways. One day, a piece she had been practicing for weeks didn't come together during rehearsal. Her fingers seemed to falter, and the melody felt disjointed. Frustrated, she nearly gave up, but she remembered the long hours of practice, the encouragement from her mentor, and the joy music had always brought her. Taking a deep breath, she started over slowly, breaking the piece into smaller sections, practicing each with patience and care. Gradually, the music began to flow, stronger and more expressive than before. She realized that persistence and patience were as important as talent. Her mentor introduced her to improvisation and composition, encouraging her to create her own pieces. At first, the idea was daunting. How could she create music that was entirely her own? She experimented, combining techniques she had learned with melodies she had imagined. The first attempts were rough, but she learned to listen carefully, adjust and refine. Gradually, her compositions became more fluid and expressive. She felt a new sense of ownership over her music, as if each piece reflected her personality, emotions, and experiences. As her reputation grew, she began receiving invitations to perform at local community events and small concerts. Each appearance was both exciting and nerve-wracking. She met new people, played for unfamiliar audiences, and felt the pressure to perform well. But each successful performance reinforced her confidence and demonstrated the impact her music could have on others. She started to understand that music was a bridge between her world and the world around her, a way to communicate without words. Even with growing recognition, she faced moments of doubt. She sometimes wondered if she was truly good enough or if her progress would plateau. In these moments, she returned to the quiet practice room, focusing on the music itself rather than the audience or expectations. Playing for herself reminded her of why she loved music in the first place: the joy, the creativity, and the sense of freedom it brought. She learned that self-belief was crucial, and that external praise, though welcome, was not the foundation of her confidence. Her school life continued alongside her musical growth. She balanced studies and music carefully, sometimes staying up late to finish assignments after long practice sessions. Teachers began to notice her dedication and improvement in discipline and focus, even if they didn't always understand her musical passion. Some classmates approached her for advice, curious about how she managed to practice so diligently. She shared her tips for balancing work and music, feeling proud to inspire others with her commitment. One particular event became a turning point. She was invited to perform at a regional school gathering, where many talented students from different towns would participate. The pressure was immense. She spent weeks preparing, practicing complex pieces, refining her technique, and rehearsing her compositions. When the day arrived, she felt nervous but ready. She played with confidence and emotion, capturing the attention of both the audience and judges. The applause at the end was overwhelming, and several teachers and music experts complimented her skill. This moment confirmed that her talent was being recognized beyond her immediate environment. She continued to compose her own pieces, experimenting with style, tempo, and expression. Each composition reflected her journey: the struggles, the perseverance, the moments of joy, and the lessons learned. She shared these pieces at small gatherings and with her mentor, receiving feedback that helped her improve. The process of creating music became as rewarding as performing it, giving her a deeper understanding of her own abilities and a sense of pride in her personal growth. Even as her reputation expanded, she remained grounded. She remembered the days when teachers laughed at her, the whispers of doubt from classmates, and the fear of performing in front of anyone. These memories reminded her of the value of perseverance and humility. She never took her success for granted, always acknowledging the effort, practice, and support that had brought her to this point. Her story began to inspire others. Younger students who were shy or unsure of their talents approached her for advice and encouragement. She shared her experiences, emphasizing the importance of practice, self-belief, and patience. Seeing others grow and gain confidence through her guidance filled her with a sense of purpose. She realized that her journey was not only about her own achievements, but also about helping others discover and nurture their gifts. She continued to perform at community events, school functions, and local competitions. Each performance brought new challenges and new opportunities for growth. She learned to adapt to different pianos, acoustics, and audiences, developing resilience and flexibility. These experiences taught her that music was not only about technical skill, but also about connecting with people, understanding emotions, and expressing oneself authentically. As she reflected on her journey, she understood that the hidden piano gift that had once been her secret refuge had now become a powerful force in her life. It had shaped her character, strengthened her determination, and opened doors to new experiences. She had learned to navigate challenges, embrace opportunities, and find joy in both practice and performance. Her music had become a voice, a way to communicate her emotions, and a source of inspiration for others. Through every step, she maintained her love for music as the guiding force. Whether practicing alone in the quiet of her home, performing for a small audience, or participating in regional competitions, she remained focused on growth, expression, and connection. She knew that her journey was ongoing, and that each day brought new lessons and new possibilities. Her talent was no longer hidden, but it remained deeply personal, a reflection of her dedication, creativity, and heart. By the end of this stage of her journey, she had achieved recognition, developed advanced skills, and gained confidence in her abilities. She had faced doubt, overcome obstacles, and discovered the power of persistence. Yet, she understood that the journey was far from over. There were more stages to reach, more performances to experience, and more opportunities to inspire others. She embraced the future with determination, knowing that her music would continue to guide her, shape her, and touch the lives of those who heard it. After years of practice, guidance, and small performances, she finally had the opportunity to play at a major local event that brought together musicians from all over the region. The hall was filled with people she had never seen before, some curious, some serious music enthusiasts, and others there simply for the experience. Her heart raced as she walked toward the piano, but there was also a quiet calmness, a sense of readiness she had never felt before. She knew this was the culmination of her journey so far, and she was determined to give her best. As she sat down, she took a deep breath and glanced at the audience. The murmurs quieted, and all eyes turned toward her. For a moment, she remembered the days when teachers laughed, when classmates doubted her, and when her confidence had been fragile. Now, she was here, ready to play with skill, passion, and experience. She closed her eyes and began to play. The opening notes were soft, delicate, and immediately drew the audience in. Her hands moved effortlessly across the keys, blending technical skill with heartfelt expression. She played a mix of classical pieces, improvisations she had created, and original compositions that reflected her journey. Every note seemed to tell a story, conveying joy, struggle, hope, and triumph. She felt completely immersed, losing herself in the music as the audience sat captivated, holding their breath with each crescendo and pause. As the performance continued, she noticed subtle reactions around the room. People leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide with admiration. Some whispered softly to neighbors, impressed by the precision and emotion of her playing. Even seasoned musicians in the audience nodded in appreciation, recognizing the depth of talent and dedication she had poured into each piece. She felt a profound connection with the audience, realizing that her music could touch hearts in ways words never could. The final piece was one she had composed herself. It began quietly, almost introspectively, then grew in complexity and intensity, reflecting the journey she had traveled. The melody swelled and ebbed, carrying emotion through every note. She played with confidence and freedom, allowing the piano to speak for her. When the last chord rang out, it lingered in the hall, and a moment of silence followed. Then, applause erupted, powerful and unrestrained. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, and she felt a wave of emotion unlike anything she had ever experienced. Tears welled in her eyes as she stood to take a bow. For the first time, she felt the full impact of her journey. The years of secret practice, the guidance of her mentor, the support of her family, and the perseverance through doubt and ridicule. Every note had been a step toward this moment, and the recognition she received was not just for her skill, but for her determination and heart. She realized that all those early struggles had shaped her, giving her strength and resilience. After the performance, she was approached by teachers, musicians, and audience members, all expressing admiration and curiosity about her story. A few of the teachers who had once laughed at her were there, their expressions a mix of surprise and respect. One whispered, "I didn't realize how talented you were." She smiled quietly, understanding that acknowledgement now was a sign of growth, not revenge. She had achieved her success through dedication and love for her music, and that was more important than any approval she might have sought in the past. Her mentor was there as well, tears glistening in her eyes. She hugged her tightly and said, "I always knew you could do it. This is only the beginning." Those words reinforced a sense of pride and gratitude. She knew that while this performance was a milestone, her journey in music was far from over. There were more compositions to create, more stages to perform on, and more opportunities to touch hearts with her gift. In the days following the event, invitations came from other schools, community gatherings, and local music festivals. People wanted to hear her play, to experience the emotion and skill she brought to the piano. She also began to consider teaching others, sharing her knowledge and encouraging young musicians who were unsure of their own abilities. She remembered the encouragement she had received from her mentor and family, and she wanted to provide that same support to others. Her family continued to be her foundation. Her sibling would sit beside her during practice, often trying to play along and laughing when fingers stumbled. Her parents attended every performance they could, beaming with pride. Their presence reminded her that no matter how big her audience became, she would always have a home where her music was cherished and celebrated. These connections strengthened her love for music and reinforced the joy it brought to both herself and those around her. School continued to be part of her life, though now her reputation preceded her. Teachers who had once doubted her now acknowledged her skill quietly, and a few classmates who had teased her began to show admiration. She remained humble, never boasting about her achievements, and focused on her craft. She understood that recognition was fleeting if not accompanied by continued effort and dedication. Each day was an opportunity to improve, to learn, and to grow. She also began exploring new musical styles and techniques, challenging herself to expand beyond what she had learned so far. Jazz, contemporary, and even experimental pieces became part of her practice, pushing her creativity and skill. She discovered that music had endless possibilities, and her curiosity drove her to explore them fully. Each new style and composition added to her depth as a musician and gave her fresh ways to express herself. As her skill grew, so did her understanding of the power of music. She realized that it could inspire, comfort, and unite people. She played for those who were sad, for celebrations, and for moments of reflection. She saw how music could bring strangers together, how a melody could evoke emotions shared by an entire audience. This understanding made her more thoughtful and intentional in her compositions and performances, as she sought to create experiences that resonated deeply. Her story began to spread beyond her local community. Social media posts and word of mouth shared her performances and compositions, and she received messages of encouragement from people she had never met. Many wrote about how her music had inspired them to pursue their own passions, to continue practicing despite doubt, or to express themselves creatively. She felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that her journey could encourage others to find and nurture their hidden talents. Despite the growing attention, she remained grounded and focused on her love for music itself. She understood that the applause, recognition, and opportunities were wonderful, but the true reward was the joy and fulfillment she found in playing. Each practice session, each composition, each small performance carried meaning, and she cherished every moment. Her relationship with the piano was not defined by audience approval, but by the connection she felt with the music and with herself. She also reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The early days of laughter and doubt, the quiet evenings of practice, the support of her mentor and family, and the small performances that built her confidence had all been essential. She realized that her talent had always existed, but it was perseverance, patience, and belief in herself that had allowed it to flourish. This awareness deepened her appreciation for her own growth and reinforced her determination to continue pursuing music. As she looked to the future, she imagined larger stages, more complex compositions, and opportunities to inspire even more people. She knew that challenges would come, that mistakes would happen, and that moments of doubt were inevitable. But she also knew that she had faced difficulties before and had emerged stronger each time. Her music had given her courage, resilience, and a sense of purpose that would carry her through any obstacle. Her ultimate triumph was not just in her skill or recognition, but in the transformation she had undergone. From a student whose teachers laughed, she had grown into a confident musician capable of moving others with her art. She had discovered her hidden gift, nurtured it with dedication, and shared it with the world. The journey had taught her the value of persistence, self-belief, and the power of following one's passion, lessons that would guide her throughout life. In the quiet moments after her performances, when the applause had faded and the audience had left, she would sit at the piano and play for herself. These moments reminded her of why she started, why she persevered, and why music would always be a part of her life. Each note was a celebration of her journey, a reflection of her heart, and a promise of what was still to come. And so, her hidden piano gift, once laughed at and underestimated, became a source of inspiration, joy, and connection. It transformed her life and touched the lives of those who listened. Through talent, determination, and love for her craft, she had turned doubt into triumph, silence into music, and her hidden gift into a legacy that would resonate far beyond the stage.